Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Marcus Bennett pushed open the massive door of his hotel, breathing in the fresh air of the lobby decorated with marble and glittering chandeliers. The staff, elegant and impeccable, seemed ready to welcome hand-picked guests. Yet, as soon as he approached the counter, the polite smiles turned into barely veiled contempt. "Hello, I would like a room for the night," Marcus said calmly, adjusting his crisp jacket. The receptionist, a young blonde woman with a forced smile, looked him up and down. You're sure you can afford our suites, sir?" she said with a barely concealed sneer. Marcus felt a familiar sting, the burn of humiliation he knew all too well. He'd already found himself judged by his color, looked down upon by those who knew nothing about him. He silently observed every detail, the condescending tone, the looks of other employees whispering behind his back, the slight recoil of a doorman as he walked past. What they didn't know was that Marcus Bennett was no ordinary guest. He was the owner of this hotel, the man who had built this empire with his own two hands. And as he smiled inwardly, an idea formed in his mind. Revenge would be sweet, relentless, and completely unexpected. That night, Marcus didn't leave the hotel angry. He left the lobby silently, already planning a comeback that would leave his employees speechless, confronted with the truth they never wanted to see. Marcus stepped out of the hotel, his footsteps echoing softly on the marble lobby. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy, but inside his mind, an implacable calm reigned. Every detail of the humiliation he had just suffered was etched in his memory. The mocking whispers, the skeptical glances, the implicit doubt in their eyes, none of it had escaped his notice. He sat in his car, a luxurious black SUV, and let his mind ponder. "How can they not know who I am?" he thought, not with anger, but with cold determination. Marcus knew this wasn't just arrogance on the part of the employees. It reflected a systemic bias, an inability to see beyond skin color. Yet he didn't feel powerless. On the contrary, he had all the tools he needed to turn this humiliation into a masterclass. He knew every corner of his hotel, every contract, every rule. He had the means to change the situation without ever raising his voice. As he returned home, Marcus made a firm decision. He would not confront his employees in a fit of anger. His revenge would be subtle, calculated, almost artistic. He would orchestrate a situation where their arrogance and ignorance would turn against them, while revealing his true identity at the perfect moment. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He worked out every detail of his plan, the event he would organize, the invitations he would send, the influential journalists and clients who would attend. Every element had to be perfect. He knew that with patience and intelligence, he could turn the humiliation he had suffered into a resounding triumph. The shock of the day wasn't his defeat. He had used it as fuel for his silent revenge. And in the silence of his home, Marcus smiled faintly. Very soon, those who had scorned him would understand that they had just humiliated the hotel owner, and that he planned to show them, in the most unexpected way, that they had been wrong. Back in his apartment, Marcus settled into his office, surrounded by files, plans, and computers. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but his mind was entirely on his hotel and the employees who had humiliated him. He didn't just want revenge, he wanted every action to be precise, irrefutable, and to leave a lasting lesson. Marcus reviewed the staff, names, positions, attitudes, behaviors. He mentally noted those who had been arrogant, those who had clumsily tried to correct their behavior, and those who, by instinct, had shown a minimum of respect. Every detail would serve his plan. He knew he had to remain anonymous for now, because surprise would be his greatest asset. Then he thought about the event he would organize at his hotel. A prestigious evening, inviting influential clients, business partners, and luxury journalists. Everything had to be perfect, and he knew he could use this setting to reveal his true identity in a spectacular way. The employees, convinced they knew the real, unknown guest, would be completely disarmed. Marcus smiled, imagining their reaction when they realized they had disrespected the owner himself. But he wouldn't act out of anger. His revenge would be subtle and clever: quiet promotions for those who had shown respect, strategic responsibilities removed from those who had been arrogant, and a public revelation that would leave everyone speechless. He spent the evening crafting invitations, contacting journalists, and creating a flawless program for the evening. Every detail counted: the placement of tables, the order of speeches, the coordination of staff. Marcus knew that perfection lay in the small details his employees considered insignificant. As he finished his planning, a sense of calm and power washed over him. The humiliation he had suffered earlier in the day would not be forgotten, but it would be transformed into an opportunity to teach an unforgettable lesson. In the stillness of the night, Marcus stood, looked at the illuminated skyline, and whispered to himself, "They think they have judged me, very soon they will understand that they have judged the master of their own world." The big day finally arrived. The already sumptuous hotel had been prepared with meticulous care. Every table, every chandelier, every corner of the lobby was to reflect the luxury and perfection Marcus had always desired for his establishment. But more importantly, every detail would serve to expose the employees who had humiliated him. Marcus entered the lobby under a false name, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, and greeted the staff with feigned politeness. The employees, some familiar with the faces but not the names, were unaware. The forced smiles and skeptical looks were there, exactly as he had anticipated. He carefully observed those who had mistreated him: the blonde receptionist who had judged him, the doorman who had hesitated to open the limousine door, and several waiters who had shown their contempt when he arrived last time. Marcus noted every gesture, every word, like a painter sketching his masterpiece. Guests began to arrive, elegant and influential, some snapping photos of the glittering lobby and lavish decorations. The employees, under pressure, were beginning to show signs of subtle anxiety. Some stumbled in their movements, others spoke too loudly, or forgot simple instructions. Marcus simply watched, silent, a faint smile playing on his lips. On several occasions, he entrusted them with key tasks: welcoming important guests, serving drinks, and overseeing the installation of technical elements for the evening. Some, trying to appear competent, failed despite their efforts, while others appeared arrogant, convinced of their superiority. Every action and every mistake was carefully recorded by Marcus, both mentally and through a few discreet photos he had taken. As the evening progressed, Marcus felt the excitement building. The employees, unaware of his true identity, were trapping themselves. The contrast between their arrogance and Marcus's calm elegance was striking. He knew he didn't need to shout or openly humiliate: the truth would be his best weapon, and the moment of revelation was fast approaching. As the lobby filled, Marcus thought, soon they'll realize that the client they scorned is the one who rules this world. And when that day comes, their arrogance will be their own prison. Throughout the evening, Marcus continued to observe each employee like a chess master watches his pieces. He didn't just want them to succeed or fail at their tasks, he wanted to test their true nature, their loyalty, their respect for those they considered inferior. He began by assigning simple but crucial tasks. The blonde receptionist was to greet a highly influential guest and guide him to his suite without error. The doorman was to oversee the arrival of a limousine and check every detail of security. The waiters were to serve hors d'oeuvres and drinks, while remaining attentive to every request. The reactions were swift. Some employees, panicked, began to stutter, mix up orders, or show slight contempt despite their apparent effort. The receptionist, who had openly humiliated him earlier, was trembling slightly and stammering excuses for every clumsy gesture. Marcus mentally noted every mistake and hesitation, savoring the subtlety of his revenge. Other employees, less arrogant, were attentive and professional. Marcus smiled inwardly: these people would be rewarded later, and they would understand that respect and loyalty were the only valuable currencies in his hotel. On several occasions, he subtly intervened, correcting minor errors with a polite smile, leaving the guests impressed by his calm and expertise. No one knew he was anything but a mere customer. Each correction was a silent message to the employees: he was observing everything, and nothing would escape his gaze. Meanwhile, Marcus savored the anticipation of the revelation. Every awkwardness, every worried look, every desperate attempt to appear competent added to the intensity of his strategy. He knew the perfect moment to reveal his true identity was approaching. And when that moment came, the surprise and humiliation they would feel would be proportional to their past arrogance. As he moved discreetly among the guests, Marcus thought, soon they will see that their hasty judgment was only a mirror of their own ignorance. And I will be the one to show them the truth. The long-awaited moment arrived. Soft music filled the lobby, guests chatted elegantly, and the lights accentuated the hotel's splendor. Marcus made one last discreet tour, observing his nervous employees, some trembling, others trying to mask their discomfort. They still didn't know who they were dealing with. Then, calmly, Marcus walked to the center of the hall, removing his jacket and adjusting his tie with a confident smile. The conversations gradually ceased. All eyes turned to him, an elegant, self-assured man whose presence commanded respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a clear, calm voice, "I want to thank you for your presence this evening." The employees exchanged confused glances. Some thought he was another influential guest, but nothing more. Marcus continued, leaving a carefully calculated silence. "This hotel is my creation," he said, raising his hand slightly toward the lavish lobby. "My name is Marcus Bennett, and I am the owner of this establishment." A gasp rippled through the room. The guests were stunned, but the employees instantly paled. The blonde receptionist, who had humiliated him, dropped a stack of cards with a stifled gasp. The doorman took a step back, unable to meet the gaze of the master he had ignored just days earlier. Marcus didn't shout or mock. He simply let the silence and shock do their work. Murmurs filled the hall, some guests applauded softly, while others stared at Marcus in awe and wonder. The employees, taken aback, stammered excuses, trying to justify their past behavior. But Marcus gently shook his head. "You had the opportunity to know me as a customer, but you chose contempt. Tonight, you see the truth." His calm, confident, and intelligent expression far outweighed the fear and shame he saw on their faces. Marcus knew his revenge didn't require harsh words, revelation alone was enough to right the wrong. The guests continued to watch, fascinated by the story unfolding before them. Marcus had transformed the humiliation he had suffered into a quiet but resounding moment of triumph, and everyone in the room understood the power of patience, strategy, and dignity. After the revelation, a heavy silence fell over the lobby. The frozen employees finally understood the magnitude of their mistake. Marcus was in no hurry to judge them aloud. He knew that the best lesson was not direct confrontation, but a subtle demonstration of his authority and intelligence. He walked over to the reception desk, carefully observing the receptionist who had judged him. "Sarah," he said calmly, "I'd like you to escort our chief guest to his suite. Make sure everything is perfect." She nodded, her hands trembling. Every move she made was carefully observed, and Marcus mentally noted her mistakes and successes. He didn't scold her or humiliate her, he wanted her to understand for herself the cost of her past arrogance. Then he addressed the other employees generally. "Tonight, you all had the opportunity to demonstrate your professionalism and respect for customers. Some failed, others succeeded. Know that in this hotel, and in any business, these qualities are what separate good employees from mediocre ones." The employees looked down, red with shame. Not a single harsh word had been spoken, yet the message was clear. Marcus had demonstrated his power without needing to raise his voice, his revenge was complete in his simple mastery of the situation. He continued, his tone calm but firm, "I built this hotel with patience, hard work, and respect for all my guests and employees. But what you showed me tonight was not acceptable. In the future, I expect each of you to act with dignity and professionalism, regardless of the color, appearance, or perceived status of the guests." Marcus concludes his lesson by turning to the guests, "And you, dear friends, see here that respect and silent intelligence can transform an unjust situation into an example of mastery and dignity." The guests' murmurs of admiration and awed looks underscored the lesson vividly. The employees understood that their arrogance and prejudice had been exposed without the need for a humiliating confrontation. Marcus's revenge was subtle, effective, and unforgettable. In a corner of the hall, Marcus smiled faintly. His mission wasn't just to right a past wrong, he had just planted a seed of respect and conscience in the minds of those who had doubted him. The next day, the hotel was already abuzz. Journalists who had been there the day before had published articles detailing the incident, praising Marcus Bennett's composure and dignity. Social media was ablaze, photos, videos, and testimonies circulated, telling the story of a black man humiliated by his own employees and who had orchestrated a subtle and masterful revenge. The employees, however, felt the effects immediately. Calls from customers, new and regular, were punctuated by curious questions. Is it true that Mr. Bennett is the owner? Or, I heard about the party last night. Every mention of the event reminded everyone of the previous day's lesson, and the unease was palpable among those who had been arrogant or dismissive. Marcus, watching all this from his desk, couldn't help but smile. His strategy was working perfectly. He had transformed the humiliation he had suffered into a public demonstration of his intelligence and dignity. But he also knew that true power lay in patience and control. One should not be satisfied with the glory of the moment. He began to structure subtle changes within the hotel. Employees who had shown respect and competence were given greater responsibilities and discreet promotions. Those who had been haughty, arrogant, or negligent were reassigned to less strategic tasks, while retaining their dignity. No public humiliation, only intelligent, quiet correction. The media continued to report the story, highlighting the contrast between the employees' past arrogance and Marcus's mastery. Articles spoke of latent racism, unconscious bias, but above all, of how one man had transformed an unjust situation into a quiet but resounding triumph. The hotel grew in reputation, attracting an even more discerning and influential clientele, eager to be part of this place where luxury met intelligence and dignity. For Marcus, this media success wasn't just personal, it was a clear signal to everyone: respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you earn. And those who underestimate others because of their color or perceived status risk paying the price, not with violence, but through the shrewdness and strategy of those they judge. Sitting in his office, Marcus looked out over the city beyond, a smile on his face. His silent vengeance had paid off, and the world had just recognized him. But for him, the true triumph wasn't the glory, it was the lesson he had just imparted, a lesson his employees would never forget. In the days following the evening, Marcus made strategic decisions to consolidate the effect of his revenge. He didn't seek to publicly humiliate his employees, but to correct behavior and reward those who had shown respect and loyalty. Each gesture was calculated, measured, almost invisible to others, but terribly effective. He began by reassigning responsibilities. Arrogant employees, who had laughed at his color and doubted him, were placed in less strategic positions: reception service, room logistics, important but discreet tasks, far from interactions with VIP guests. No hurtful words were spoken, the punishment was the loss of prestige and visibility. Conversely, those who had demonstrated professionalism and respect, sometimes even under pressure, were promoted to key positions: event supervision, management of important clients, team coordination. Their pride naturally stemmed from their success, without them immediately understanding the intention behind the decision. Marcus knew that subtle recognition was more powerful than direct rebuke. He also took care to improve internal training. Workshops on respect, diversity, and guest management were implemented, presented as standard hotel improvements. But Marcus knew that his employees' experience the day before made these trainings unforgettable. They now understood the importance of respect, not as a theory, but as a lived reality. The effects were immediate. The staff, aware of the presence of an invisible master behind every decision, became more attentive, professional, and respectful. The tension had given way to a subtle discipline, based on gratitude and the gentle fear of disappointing. Marcus, observing everything from his desk, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His revenge needed no noise, it manifested itself in every gesture of his employees, in every decision they carefully made. The lesson had been learned: respect and loyalty are the true currencies of an establishment, and those who ignore them quickly discover the consequences. And in the silence of his office, Marcus muttered to himself: "Revenge has never been a cry. It is a discreet smile, a calculated gesture, a world transformed by those who dared to underestimate me." The weeks following the evening became a turning point for Marcus and his hotel. News articles and social media posts continued to circulate, telling the story of the man humiliated by his own employees and his subtle but masterful revenge. Each mention reinforced his reputation, not only as an owner, but as a symbol of dignity, patience, and intelligence. Guests, intrigued and impressed, flocked in droves. Celebrities, influential entrepreneurs, and renowned journalists came to stay at the hotel, eager to experience a place run by a man capable of transforming humiliation into triumph. Marcus wasn't seeking glory, he was seeking to set a standard, to demonstrate that respect and competence were essential in his establishment. The employees, for their part, had changed profoundly. Those who had been arrogant were now attentive, cautious, and respectful. Those who had shown loyalty were proud of their roles, feeling that their commitment had been recognized and rewarded. Marcus had managed to transform subtle fear into positive motivation, and the hotel's atmosphere had become exemplary. During a meeting with his leadership team, Marcus took a moment to reiterate the core values: respect, professionalism, and integrity. What we've experienced these past few weeks is proof that every action matters. Every gesture, every word, every decision can have a huge impact on those around us. His words resonated with authority and sincerity. Outside the city, the media continued to relay his story. Interviews presented him as a model of self-control and dignity, a man capable of turning an unjust situation around with intelligence and patience. Social media celebrated him, and his hotel gained international prestige. Marcus, observing the positive commotion around him, felt a deep satisfaction. Revenge had been achieved in the most elegant and unexpected way, not through direct humiliation, but through strategy, patience, and mastery. He had transformed a negative experience into a lasting lesson, for himself and for others. And in the silence of his office, Marcus finally allowed himself a genuine smile. The world was looking at him, but more importantly, respect and loyalty had been restored within his own hotel. His revenge was not only accomplished, it had created lasting, profound, and memorable change. As the months passed, Marcus Bennett's hotel became a benchmark in the world of luxury. Guests came not only for the exceptional quality of the service, but also for the fascinating story of its owner, who was able to transform a humiliation into a lesson in dignity and self-control. The employees, having learned their lesson, now worked with unwavering professionalism. The mistakes and arrogance of the past had been replaced by vigilance and respect. Those who had been loyal were rewarded with promotions and increased responsibilities, and their pride was palpable. Marcus had created an environment where respect and integrity were the hotel's true currencies. One day, during an internal meeting, Marcus looked at his employees and said calmly, "You have all witnessed what patience and strategy can accomplish. What you have learned here is not just for work, it is for life. Respect, loyalty, and self-control are forces that open all doors." The employees nodded, aware of the depth of his words. They understood that true authority lay not in fear or shouting, but in control and consistency. Marcus, silent, watched their transformation with satisfaction. Outside the hotel, the media continued to relay the story of his subtle revenge, inspiring other businesses and entrepreneurs. The hotel enjoyed a period of unprecedented prosperity, attracting a prestigious and international clientele. But for Marcus, the greatest victory was invisible to the public. He had restored balance, respect, and loyalty within his team. One evening, as he stood on the balcony overlooking the illuminated city, Marcus smiled, recalling the humiliation he had suffered. This memory, once painful, had transformed into a source of strength and triumph. "They thought they had judged me," he murmured, "but I was the one who taught the lesson." And in that silence, deep and majestic, Marcus understood that his revenge had not only righted an injustice, it had created a better world around him, where respect and dignity would never again be taken lightly. His triumph was complete, subtle, but indelible.